An old man kneels on the jagged basalt of a Roman penal colony, breathing in the salt spray of the Aegean Sea, on a calendar, letting his readers know that this cosmic vision just happened to arrive on a Sunday. And we missed the danger entirely. The calendar bent around him. Time itself bowed to the resurrection. They did not just pick a day to hold a religious service. The day picked them. But holding on to this new timeline was about to become incredibly dangerous, because the followers of the Way do not stay in the shadow of the Jewish temple. They pack up their belongings. They board cargo ships. And they carry this eighth-day theology straight into the teeth of the Roman Empire. A map of the Mediterranean in the 1st century is a web of Roman roads and trade winds. The believers pack their bags. They leave Jerusalem. They arrive in Antioch. They dock in Corinth. They walk into the capital city of Rome itself, and they carry their dual timeline with them. At first, they hold both rhythms. They go to the local synagogue on Saturday. They listen to the chanting of the Torah. They run their fingers over the ancient parchment. They keep the Sabbath rest exactly as their fathers did. But when the sun sets and the first day begins, the rhythm shifts. They slip through darkened alleyways. They crowd into cramped, low-ceilinged living rooms. They light oil lamps. They break bread. They celebrate the resurrection. Saturday is the synagogue. Sunday is the house church. The law in the morning. The resurrection in the dark. But if you look closer at the specific Greek vocabulary he chooses, at the suffocating political atmosphere of the Roman Empire in the late 1st century, they hold both rhythms in a delicate tension. But the tension does not hold. The Orthodox Jewish leaders draw a line. The followers of the Nazarene are pushed to the margins. The debates grow louder. Stones are thrown in the streets. Eventually, the heavy wooden doors of the synagogue swing shut. The believers are locked out. They lose the synagogue. They lose the political protection of being a recognized Jewish sect. They lose the safety of the Sabbath gatherings. Sunday is not a convenient alternative. It is the only ground they have left. And surviving on that ground requires incredible sacrifice. Because Rome has no weekend, Rome operates on a relentless 8-day market cycle. The foundries burn. The brickyards operate. The fields demand harvest. To the Roman Empire, Sunday is just another grueling workday. The Lord's Day was not a day of rest. It was an act of defiance. The believers wake up at 3 in the morning. They walk through cold, unlit streets while the city sleeps. They sing a hymn to Christ as to a god. They eat the bread, and then they report to work for Roman masters. They meet again at midnight. They smell of sweat and wood smoke. They fight exhaustion to hear the letters of Paul read aloud in the flickering light. You start to see something the calendar reading completely ignores. The Lord's Day is not a scheduling detail. It is a declaration of treason. For 2.5 centuries, observing the Lord's Day costs people their sleep, their property, and their lives. The empire slaughters them for refusing to burn incense on the emperor's day. While they stubbornly gather on the Lord's Day, the blood flows. The church grows. The rhythm survives, until an emperor decides to stop killing them and tries something far more dangerous. A Roman emperor sits in a palatial chamber, heavy purple silk draped over his shoulders, and he dips a reed pen into dark ink. He presses his imperial seal onto a piece of parchment that will echo across centuries of human history. The decree he signs does not order hungry lions into the Colosseum, and it does not dispatch soldiers to arrest believers. It orders the empire to rest. The year is 321 AD. Constantine the Great issues the first civil law regarding the Christian gathering day. He commands that, on the venerable day of the sun, all magistrates and city populations must rest, and all workshops must be closed. For believers who have spent generations watching their family members dragged away to the executioner's block, this moment feels like a miraculous deliverance. Finally, the state-sponsored slaughter stops. Finally, they can step out of the alleyways, leave their cramped, unlit living rooms, and worship in the broad daylight. This is not a debate about whether early believers gathered on a Saturday or a Sunday. That is an argument we have superimposed over the text. Most people look back at this moment as the ultimate triumph of the early church. But this decree is not a theological victory. It is an imperial assimilation. Constantine is a brilliant, pragmatic politician trying to hold a deeply fractured and massive territory together. He does not just legalize the Christian gathering, he synchronizes it with the pagan sun-worship cults of Rome. He explicitly uses the Latin phrase, venerabilis dies, solis, the venerable day of the sun. He effectively merges the subversive, eighth-day resurrection theology of the persecuted church with the astrological calendar of the Roman state. The church leaves the shadows. The believers no longer have to huddle in the dark at 3 a.m, smelling of sweat and fighting physical exhaustion before a brutal Roman workday. They walk into massive stone basilicas. The air inside is cool. The ceilings are vaulted. And the altars are gilded with imperial gold. But something fundamental breaks in the transition. When the Lord's Day was illegal, it required absolute allegiance. You had to actively choose it over your physical safety, over your economic survival, over your very life. You gathered because the tomb was empty. And that reality was more real to you than the emperor's sword. When the Lord's Day becomes a state-sponsored public holiday, it requires absolutely nothing. It becomes a cultural default, hundreds of years after the ink dried. When John wrote those words, he was not offering a liturgical update to his churches. The sharp, subversive edge of the Kyriake Hemera is completely filed down. For nearly 300 years, gathering on the first day of the week was a dangerous declaration that Caesar was not the ultimate Lord. Now, Caesar is the one dictating the schedule of the gathering. The Roman Empire did not crush the church with violence. It neutralized the church with comfort. We still live in the long shadow of Constantine's decree today. We inherited the massive basilicas, the Sunday laws, the comfortable cultural rhythm, and that inheritance forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality about our own lives. We do not live under the threat of a Roman sword. Most of us do not have to wake up in the freezing dark, risking our physical freedom just to sing a hymn in a crowded, unlit room. We have comfortable padded chairs, climate-controlled sanctuaries, and the complete legal right to spend our weekends however we please. But here is the part I keep coming back to. When the danger disappeared, the absolute, the radical claim of the Kyriake Hemera started to fade right alongside it. We stopped seeing the first day as occupied territory. We started seeing it as a religious chore. We turned the 8th day, the day of the new creation, the day that literally fractured the ancient calendar into a 60-minute slot. He was diagnosing a conflict of kingdoms. He was naming a reality that forced every single person in his world to decide exactly who owned them. We try to squeeze in between youth sports and grocery shopping. If you are in a season where your faith feels like a hollow routine, where you are completely exhausted by the endless, grinding hum of the modern week, you might be carrying a calendar that Caesar still owns. The modern empire does not demand that you burn incense to a marble statue. It demands your attention. It demands your anxiety. It demands your endless productivity, vibrating constantly in your pocket and glowing on your glass screens from Monday to Saturday, until Sunday just becomes the day you desperately try to catch your breath. You sit there, gripping the steering wheel in Sunday morning traffic, holding a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. And the gathering feels less like a defiance of the world and more like an exhausting obligation to keep up appearances. We have forgotten what it means to be owned by a different Lord. The Lord's Day is not a religious appointment you keep to appease a distant deity. It is a public declaration of who actually owns your life. It is a deliberate, physical step off the treadmill of a culture that measures your entire worth by what you can produce. When you walk into a room with other believers, when you hear the sound of voices singing together, when you taste the unleavened bread. In the first century, claiming a day belonged to the Lord was not a religious preference. It was a direct, unapologetic challenge to the most powerful, and feel the rough edge of the communion cup against your lip. You are participating in an ancient rebellion. You are remembering that the system that exhausts you does not hold the title deed to your soul. When John stood on the jagged basalt of Patmos, hearing a voice like a brass trumpet cutting through the sound of the ocean, he was not just attending a weekend service. He was anchoring his mind in the only reality that could outlast the empire that imprisoned him. He remembered the pattern, and the pattern always points to the exact same ending. A political prisoner knelt on the jagged rocks of Patmos, and the voice of a true king shattered the empire's silence. A divided church gathered in a Corinthian dining room, and a single Greek word tore down the social hierarchy of Rome. Mourning women walked toward a sealed grave in the dark, and the first day of the week became the dawn of a new creation. Terrified men hid in locked rooms, breathing the air of their own panic, and the resurrected Christ walked through the walls to find them. Exhausted believers woke up in the cold to sing before a Roman workday, and they outlasted the emperors who tried to exterminate them. Military machine on the planet. To feel the weight of this opening scene, you have to step off the isolated rock of Patmos for a moment. A pragmatist Caesar tried to tame the subversive rhythm with comfort, and the radical invitation of the eighth day survived the assimilation anyway. One timeline, one king. But maybe the part that stays with me most is those two isolated words in the Greek text, Kuriakos, used exactly twice in the entire New Testament. Once to claim the bread on a wooden table in Corinth, once to claim the morning sky over an island penal colony. Jesus did not leave his followers a massive, complicated theological treatise on how to manage their calendars. He simply dropped a single, explosive adjective onto their meals and their mornings. He placed a flag on their bodies and their time. He reminded them, in the face of an empire that demanded their total allegiance, that they were already owned. If you are in a season where your time feels completely devoured by a culture of endless productivity, where every hour feels like a transaction and you are quietly running on empty, Sunday is not meant to be another burden on your schedule. It is an extraction. It is the eighth day. It is a locked room where the resurrected Christ is still showing up to breathe peace over your panic. It is an invitation to step off the modern calendar of endless performance and stand in the light of an empty tomb. You have to walk into the bustling, incense-choked streets of a Roman metropolis, right as the entire city is preparing to celebrate a holiday. If this reframed how you see the weekend, hit subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by the modern rhythm and needs a reminder of who actually holds their time. And please, pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts. And may the God who remade the world on the eighth day walk with you through the grueling demands of yours. May he grant you the profound peace of knowing, completely and finally, exactly who you belong to. In the Greco-Roman world of the late 1st century, the calendar is never neutral. It is owned. The rhythm of days and months is a canvas. His hands are calloused from breaking rock. His back carries the thick, raised scars of a scourging he survived decades ago, of imperial propaganda, designed to remind every citizen exactly who holds the power of life and death over their city. By the time John is exiled to Patmos, Emperor Domitian is sitting on the throne in Rome, and he has dropped the subtle political pretenses of his predecessors. He demands to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. If you walk through the Agora of Ephesus during his reign, the sensory overload is deliberate. Towering statues of polished marble cast long shadows over the local merchants. The clinking of bronze coins, each stamped with the profile of a man claiming divine status, echoes off the colonnades. You cannot buy a loaf of bread. You cannot join a trade guild. You cannot even attend a public festival without encountering the machinery of the imperial cult. To ensure this total allegiance, the empire integrates worship into the rhythm of time itself. There was a specific day each month, known as Sebaste in Greek, or the Emperor's Day, dedicated entirely to imperial honors. The air in cities like Pergamum and Smyrna would grow thick, with the smell of roasting meat from public sacrifices. The marble temples would overflow with citizens stepping forward to burn a small pinch of incense to the genius of Caesar. This act of burning incense is not a private spiritual devotion. It is the civic glue holding a fractured empire together. To refuse the incense was to invite economic ruin, social ostracization, and eventually, the executioner's sword. The title of Lord Kurios in Greek was not a generic. He is not a tourist on the island of Patmos. He is not on a spiritual retreat. He is a political exile, religious sentiment that you could apply to whichever deity you preferred. It was a sovereign, exclusive claim, minted onto the heavy currency in your pocket, and carved deep into the stone facades of the marketplaces. Caesar was the Lord, and the day honoring him belonged to him alone. And yet, a scattered, marginalized network of Jewish and Gentile believers begins doing something exceptionally dangerous. They begin using a highly specific linguistic marker to claim their own time. They take the adjective form of that politically explosive title, Kurios, and they attach it to the rhythm of their weekly gatherings. They are actively subverting the imperial calendar, taking the sacred vocabulary of the Roman Empire and weaponizing it against the emperor himself. When John writes that he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, he is committing a capital offense on parchment. But to understand the sheer weight of what John is doing, when he writes this down, you have to realize how rarely this specific adjective actually appears in the biblical text. Picture a crowded dining room in the city of Corinth. Oil lamps flicker against cracked plaster walls. The smell of cheap wine and baked fish hangs heavy in the evening heat. But the room is physically divided. The wealthy patrons recline on cushioned couches in the main triclinium. The laborers and slaves sit on the hard dirt floor out in the courtyard, banished to this isolated quarry because he refused to bow to a man who called himself a god. The sky darkens. The wind shifts, eating whatever scraps are left over. Paul receives a letter about this segregated meal. He is furious. He picks up his pen to write. He introduces a word, a very specific word. The Greek adjective is kuriakos. It means belonging to the Lord. It is an imperial word. It is a word of absolute, non-negotiable ownership. And it appears exactly twice in the entire New Testament. Not 50 times, not 20, twice. The first time is here. In 1 Corinthians 11:20, Paul looks at their segregated, status-obsessed banquet and writes, "When you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper, the Kuriakon Deipnon, that you eat." The second time is decades later. John sits on the jagged rocks of Patmos and writes, "I was in the Spirit, on the Lord's day, the Kuriake Chimera." Two appearances in the entire Greek text. One describes a table. One describes a timeline. One claims a meal. One claims a morning. One redefines how they eat. One redefines how they breathe. At that divided house church in Corinth, Paul uses kuriakos to strip the wealthy of their status. He draws a line in the sand. The table does not belong to the homeowner. The best portions do not belong to the rich. The gathering belongs to the king. The food is not property. It is presence. If the Lord owns the table, and then a sound shatters the quiet. A voice, loud as a brass trumpet blast, vibrating through his chest and rattling the stones beneath his knees. The social hierarchy of the Roman Empire dies at the door. A slave and a senator break the same bread. They submit to the same master. John takes that exact same explosive adjective. He lifts it from the communion table, and he drops it onto the weekly calendar. He is exiled by an empire that claims to own time. Caesar claims the civic days. Caesar claims the harvest months. Caesar claims the public festivals. John looks at the first day of the week and writes, Kuriake Hemera. The day is not a blank space on a Roman schedule. It is occupied territory. But here is what most people miss when they read this shift. They assume the early church just decided to invent a new holiday. They assume it was a casual scheduling adjustment to separate themselves from Judaism. It was not. Because almost every single person in that first century church was Jewish. They already had a day. They had a rhythm built into their bones, stitched into the fabric of creation itself. They had the Sabbath. To move the language of absolute ownership away from the seventh day and onto the first day, required more than a theological committee meeting. It required a cataclysm. To understand why they shifted the timeline, you have to look at the exact Greek phrase Matthew uses when the women walk up to a tomb in the dark. John records this moment in the opening chapter of his Revelation. He sets the scene with a detail that seems entirely mundane to modern ears. Before the sun breaks the horizon over Jerusalem, the air is cold and thick with the scent of crushed spices. Women walk silently through the narrow dirt paths just outside the city walls, carrying burial myrrh and aloe. They are moving toward a garden. They are moving toward a grave. Matthew chapter 28, verse 1. The Sabbath has passed. The men who promised to fight for Jesus are hiding in locked rooms. The women arrive at the tomb, and Matthew anchors this world-shattering moment in time with a specific phrase. In English, your Bible probably reads, "Toward the dawn of the first day of the week," but the word for week is not actually there. The Greek phrase Matthew writes is eis mian sabbaton. Literally, he writes, toward day one of the Sabbath. The Greek word for week in the New Testament is often simply the plural form of the word for Sabbath. The ancient Jewish mind did not think of a week as a generic block of 7 secular days. Time was tethered. Every single day was defined by its distance from the sacred rest of the 7th day. To the Jewish believers, I was in the Spirit, he writes in Revelation 1:10, on the Lord's Day. Most people read that phrase, the Lord's Day, and they immediately map it. Sunday was not the start of a secular work week. It was Miaton Sabbaton, the first step in the shadow of the Sabbath. Decades later, when Luke describes the church gathering to break bread in Acts 20, he uses the exact same phrase. They gather on Miaton Sabbaton, day one. If seeing the ancient Jewish timeline hidden inside English translations is sparking questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the believers are living inside this Sabbath-centered calendar. But something happens in that garden that violently disrupts their ancient rhythm. A heavy stone is rolled back. Linen burial cloths are left folded on a cold stone slab. A dead man breathes the morning air. The resurrection does not just defeat death, it fractures the Jewish timeline. Suddenly, the earliest Jewish believers are caught between two massive gravitational pulls. The 7th day points backward to the first creation, the moment God finished making the heavens and the earth and rested. But the first day, Miaton Sabbaton, onto their own weekly routine. They picture a quiet Sunday morning. They imagine families walking into a building with stained glass, holding a bulletin. Sitting in wooden pews, points forward to the new creation, the moment God defeated the grave and began putting the ruined world back together. Their transition to Sunday is not a rebellion against the law. It is a shockwave radiating from an empty tomb. But to grasp why this specific morning ultimately claimed the imperial title of the Lord's Day, you have to look at how this community started counting. Because they were not just looking at the first day, they were looking at the 8th. It is late afternoon on a dusty road to Emmaus. 2 men walk with their heads bowed, the sun beating down on their backs. A stranger joins them. He walks with them into the evening. He sits at their table. He breaks a loaf of bread. And suddenly, their eyes are opened. It is evening in Jerusalem. The heavy wooden doors of an upper room are bolted shut. The disciples sit in the dark, breathing the stale air of their own panic. Without a knock, without the sound of hinges turning, a man is standing in the middle of the room. He holds out his hands. He shows them the jagged, ruined flesh where the iron spikes went through. He breathes on them. Both of these moments happen on Miaton Sabbaton, day one. And then, the writer of the 4th Gospel does something deeply intentional. We are a culture that divides our time neatly into workdays and weekends, secular hours and sacred hours. So we naturally assume John is simply checking a box. John tells us exactly when Jesus returns for Thomas, the disciple who was missing that first night. John does not vaguely wave at the calendar. He does not say, a little while later. He writes, 8 days later, Another locked room, another Sunday, another physical manifestation of the risen Christ. A pattern is forming. A new rhythm is being forged in real time. For thousands of years, the seventh day was the absolute climax of human existence. 6 days of labor in the dirt, followed by 1 day of divine rest. It was a closed, perfect circle. Creation was finished. But a resurrection cannot be contained in a closed circle. The earliest Christian writers begin using a strange, poetic phrase to describe Sunday. They call it the eighth day. The eighth day is not just the start of another mundane work week. It is the dawn of an entirely new creation, breaking into the dying shell of the old one. 7 days made the first world. The eighth day remakes it. The seventh day celebrated a finished work. The eighth day celebrates an empty grave. This shift was not an administrative decision drafted by a committee in Jerusalem. This was an explosive, involuntary reaction to the physical presence of God. When Jesus repeatedly chose to show up in their locked rooms, on their dusty roads, and at their dinner tables on the first day of the week,